Hello and welcome to John and James Live, where we discuss real world events in real time. How are you, James CeeLo?
I'm very good.
Wow,
John Hastings. I almost said Hingston. That's somebody
John
completely
John
different.
Hingston. Who the hell's that, James? Is that
That's
your new
that's
best friend?
that's a that's a friend of mine.
That
Clearly,
new
you're not.
that new countdown. I started to get nervous, wasn't
It's like
it? My palms were sweating when that countdown was coming. I was like, oh Jesus, we're going live. So
yeah.
today we're going to talk about. We'll touch on Ukraine. We've got just the updates on that, what's going on. Then we've got Trump trying to support Andrew Tate. We'll touch on the whole Trump saga and the whole Andrew. We can't speak today.
Shall we start again?
Andrew Tate. Yeah, this guy is quite divisive, isn't he, Mr. Andrew Tate?
He is.
So it should be quite interesting. And then we have a little talk on feminism and the patriarchy, because I put a post out about the war on motherhood, and hell, it was polarizing, wasn't it, James?
All hell broke loose.
All hell broke loose on that one. I went in there with a lot of naivety. And if you don't get that wording exactly, maybe right, or if some things can be misconstrued, Jesus, they are jumped upon, aren't they? Quite badly. So you either got people that was quite okay with it, happy, understood it, took it in good faith with good intentions, and some people was like, John, you're a misogynist, you're sexist, you know, who are you to talk? You shouldn't have a voice because you're a man. So it was very, very polarizing.
It was interesting, mate. Eye-opening. So should we go through it in the order that we said, and then we'll leave that nugget for the end? Let's finish on a.
Yeah, we'll go for it in the order. So we've got the updates on Ukraine at the moment. So they had a meeting, didn't they, in Saudi Arabia, and the Ukrainians said that they weren't invited. So it looks like America and the Russians are sort of driving ahead with trying to see what the negotiations could be, see what's on the table, what could be done. Again, it's complicated, isn't it?
It's always complicated. These things get resolved really quickly if they weren't so complicated.
Trump thinks that he could have stopped this war from the beginning, and they could have given away, you know, loads of land, and they would have been okay, and there wouldn't have been any war. So, you know, love him or hate him with Trump, I just get the feeling that he will get a deal done because of his ego is huge. Him saying something and it not happening gives me confidence that he will just make it done. Who knows who's it going to be in the interest of? You know, might not be good for Ukrainians, but something will be done, and hopefully, hopefully just people stop dying, don't they, James, on the battlefield?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more important than that. But I watched a brief video of Trump doing a speech. It was only a snippet, so again, it didn't give the whole kind of discourse and exactly what he said, but it was along the lines of like, if I could have done the deal and I could have made it, you know, very quick and beneficial for everybody. And he basically looks at it like business, doesn't he? So he would approach it exactly the same way as he would do a business deal if he was negotiating on Trump Tower or, you know, on a golf course or anything like that. He's used to people coming at him with objections and reasons why he can't do something, and that he'll try and figure out the ways in which he can do it. So again, incredibly divisive guy, love him or hate him, but he would approach that in exactly the same situation as he would a business deal. Yeah. And, you know, if you apply those principles, then I guess you're in with a chance of kind of getting some sort of outcome. We don't know what that outcome is going to be. But if you're sort of, you know, moving around each other and nothing's really getting sorted, but at the end of the day, it's about international diplomacy, and it's looking about what one side wants, what the other side wants, and then it's coming together so that the other side feels like they're getting what they came in for originally, but actually the other party's getting what they wanted as well. So there's a negotiation that needs to be going on. And that negotiation is based on both sides feeling like they've got some ground, that they know they have to give in somewhere. And invariably, from Trump's perspective, are come in with something so outrageous to begin with that what he then asks for afterwards, this is the negotiation tool, doesn't then look quite so onerous, because
doesn't look bad, does it?
So
Yeah,
ridiculous thing with. So actually, if they compromise somewhere lower down, they go, well, at least it wasn't as bad as what he came in with originally.
It's a clever negotiating tactic, isn't it?
An age-old negotiation tactic that you come in with a ridiculous request, and then everything else seems reasonable after that.
And in terms of the Ukraine, I just don't think they would have been able to put up any sort of a fight really without the investment of America and the West and other countries getting involved with, supporting them with money and weaponry. The Russian machine of war is huge. They could have. It could have been really bad. So Trump probably.
And I think they thought they would just roll in and the Ukrainians would roll over, that they would submit. They didn't bank on that level of resistance and for it to go on this long.
Yeah, but they wouldn't be able to do it, would they, without the financial support? So if any financial support is pulled, then it's pretty much, it could be the days are numbered on that. But in reality, it's all money, numbers on screen. There's actually real husbands, sons that are being, killed on the battlefield. So hopefully, whatever you think of these guys, love him or hate him.
Well, women and children as well, mate. Let's not forget they're becoming collateral damage. So loads
of women, but majority it is men, isn't it? The majority of the time, it is men out there on the battlefield. Probably 99% of them are guys getting obliterated. So hopefully, whatever they do, they stop this as quick as possible. But in terms of sticking with Trump, we've got a couple of questions here. We've got a hello from let's go. We've got hello there. We've got Sean Young on there. Hey Sean, how are you? Hope you're well. And then we have Ben Reed. They say if negotiation is successful, both sides should be equally happy as its conclusion. They say if a negotiation is truly successful, fair, both sides should be equally unhappy at the conclusion. So it's sort of like a divorce, isn't it? No one really walks away happy. That's the sort of end goal.
And again, it's having that awareness that they know that leader has to go back to their nation, their cabinet, and report back as to what they've negotiated. So it's not only what they're talking about there and then, it's about the ramifications of going back and telling them what it is that you've negotiated on. So that's always in the back of their mind as well. So I think from one side, if they're thinking from that perspective, they think, well, actually, if I can give this person something that they can go back with and for that to be accepted, then that is going to get us closer to this deal in terms of an outcome. So it's lots of different kind of things that need to be taken into consideration. It's so nuanced, it's so multifactorial.
It's so murky, isn't it? This whole thing. I did a post on Hunter Biden and just looking, sometimes I haven't really paid too much attention to this stuff, but once you start digging into it and you start looking and you think, wow, man, he was like on the board of some energy company. This guy was, a drug addict, alcoholic, mentally ill. And it's like, what was he doing? What was his role in being on the board on an energy company in Ukraine? And it is very murky behind the curtain, and there's a lot going on that we don't know. But in terms of people that are benefiting from this war, we've got investment companies that are already sitting there waiting to indebt these countries for decades ahead in terms of giving them investment. And then we've got these weapons companies. I watched the news today and the guy was talking about, we're going to spend X amount of more GDP on defense. It's billions and billions and billions. And it's
huge
just
business.
It's just it's a very sad, huge business. What do you think it is, James? Is this war defense game, and the guy on the TV, the English guy who was the defense secretary, was using the words like to win, and I just felt that was very sensationalist language. That is not, it's not good language to have, isn't it, when you're talking about weaponry and defense and stuff? Like, nobody really wins. Even if you think you win a war, you can just create terrorism for, you know, decades and generations afterwards. What do you think, James?
Well, yeah, I totally agree, mate. It's a ripple effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you're sorting out one conflict now, but what are the ramifications long term? You know, how are you going to, through your actions, then, you know, create a completely disenfranchised nation that will be seeking revenge and have been displaced?
Yeah.
And then you're causing problems further down the line. So, you know, all of these things should be taken into consideration. It's like, well, actually, people are dying right now. What do we need to do to stop that? That's first and foremost. And then it's like, well, then, you know, you can see when troops are pulled out, you know, what then the political climate looks like afterwards. What are you putting in place to create stability that's taking into account what was there for millennia before you came in all guns blazing? It's like, you know, if there was unrest, what was that unrest caused by? If these other factions are there that are causing these things to happen, it's a little bit like taking medication. You're taking one particular medication, but you need to take 3 or 4 other medications to counter the effects of that medication.
That's a good
so
analogy.
At what point do you just sort of go, well, let's zero base this and see where we go from here, and do the minimal amount to actually, you know, bring this back to a peaceful conclusion, that we're not then creating more problems. Take your car into the mechanic and the mechanic takes a spark plug out, so you got to go take it back to have.
It's like that, isn't it? It really is like that.
It feels that way, that there's like, oh, we'll just do a little bit. Let's just poke a bit more here, so that there's a need for this. There's a necessity for that to kind of come into play.
And the amount of money being shifted around here, James, is just,
that's what it feels like.
It's mind-boggling money in this weapons industry, isn't it? Like, who's benefiting from this war? What's the utopian vision here of an advanced civilization, James? Is it to demilitarize the whole world? But how do you do that? Because you're relying on other people following the same psychology. But if you're an advanced civilization, is that a sign? Demilitarization is a sign of, you know, emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that's a very existential question, isn't it? That you can say, well, actually, if there aren't any weapons and there's no violence and there's no conflict, that everybody's happy, that there wouldn't be the need for it. That'd be great. Would that be utopia? Yeah. You know, would we ever be able to achieve something like that as a society? I'm fairly doubtful, to be honest. Unless you have some kind of mind control, that everybody has that way in which they can vent in a constructive, peaceful way, that all of those kind of feelings, all of those emotions can be outpoured in a constructive way that doesn't impact on everybody else. But you think all the time there's greed, all the time there's territory required, or you've got something that we want that's going to help and this is what we were talking about the other day, sort of in terms of territorial borders. It's like there's the them and us mentality. And we'll see it, and we'll talk about this in terms of the feminist debate as well, that all the time you've got the them and us. There's friction. You know, they don't do things the way we do. They don't have our values. They're trying to come and take that from us, so we've got to defend it at all costs. So all the time that exists as a mentality, as a mindset, then there'll always be conflict, there'll always be wars, and it will be one person who has an advantage over another person, one nation state that has an advantage over another nation state in terms of economics, in terms of weaponry, in terms of technology. And I don't know how that can ever be eradicated unless, as I said, there's a way in which you can, you know, control the mindsets. But who's controlling the mindset? You know, and then AI, you bring AI into the debate of saying, well, actually, AI will have an emotionless entity that's there just going, okay, well, that's starting to happen. I'm going to see that off at the pass. I can see what's going on here. I've mapped out what's happened historically. I'm going to step in before that then escalates. Are we then absolving ourselves? Are we giving agency over to a technology that can then counter human nature? I'll just leave that one hanging in the ether, mate.
I just think the long-term trajectory of an advanced civilization is to demilitarize, because what's the other option? You'll get the technology there where you can just press one button and the whole world will blow up. So,
but then you'll say, well, then the threat from both sides, that the threat from this side is going to counter the threat from that side. As long as those two exist, then you have peace in the middle somewhere. But there's always that threat. So, like, if you take both of them out of the equation, I mean, that's utopia, that even these things aren't needed anymore. Have we got it so far into our consciousness that that is the way it's always been? In which case, that is the way it has to always be.
It's got, because it's mind blowing. I was speaking to someone on a post yesterday and just saying the actual mind control of the masses, because really these wars are fought in boardrooms. I looked at the talk yesterday in Saudi Arabia, and it is pretty much just white old guys in boardrooms deciding the lives of millions. And then I heard a guy who was in the military in the UK, and he was saying, yeah, we're ready to go and all this type of stuff. And he hasn't got a clue what he's getting into. He's just a trained soldier. There's no political awareness, really. There is maybe a political awareness, but it's not like a very deep awareness of what they're doing. They're more like machines, aren't they? So isn't it fascinating, that control, James?
It is. But it just, let's take it down to the level of, like, I've known a few guys in the military, and I think you have as well. And depending on the individual, that some see it as just a job. That, they like the camaraderie, they like the training, the discipline, feeling like they are serving a purpose. But I guess in the back of their minds, it's always that sort of thing. It's like, but whether it comes into the consciousness on a regular basis, like, actually, I could be in a conflict zone. I could be going to war. And what does that look like? And the actuality of going in and being in a situation where either you're going to be killed, you're going to kill somebody else, or somebody very close to you gets killed. Whether that goes through the mindset is another thing. But it's like, well, what is my purpose? If I'm in the military, I'm getting paid by the taxpayer to do this, but I haven't seen any conflict. So am I here to serve as a deterrent? Am I here to actually go and fulfill my function? All of this training that I've done, all of this breaking me down and then building me back up again, so that when I'm in that situation, I will perform as I'm supposed to perform. What is that all about? There must be guys and women in there thinking, this is my reason. This is my my existence is built around conflict. Otherwise, why am I here? Now, they are doing peacekeeping missions. They are doing all of those other things as well. You've got to acknowledge that. When it's required, they step in and to do other things. So it's not just about the conflict. We appreciate that. But fundamentally, that's their role, is to keep peace, but if required, to go and fight to propel an enemy from our borders, or to go overseas and fight to, defend the underdog.
And it is, we do assume that we are the good guys. Like, everybody on every side thinks they are the virtuous ones, don't they?
Like, you can come up with a reason.
Everyone
to justify
says that. Like, Russia, this invading our, Ukraine and stuff. And if you said to American, okay, imagine this was in Mexico and you wanted this to happen in Mexico, what would you say? If you played the flipping game, it can get, with the UK, America, it can get very hypocritical when it comes to that type of thing, can't it?
Yeah.
I've got a question here. We go from the big man, Daniel. Welcome, Daniel. Unfortunately, religion and belief structures are the root of all evil now and historically. I think in terms of belief structures, 100%. I think that's pretty much everything is a belief, isn't it, James? From the country names to your name to
Yeah,
every single structure to money to banking, everything's underpinned. If you read a book called
comes down to
Sapiens,
identity, doesn't it?
it's underpinned by
Mm.
belief systems en masse, and that's how we differentiate ourselves from monkeys, basically. That our ability to have a belief system en masse.
Yeah,
That's pretty much
it's
the
like,
difference.
what is it? What is it to be British? What is it to be French? What is it to be Spanish?
Yeah,
You know, it
religion
comes
as
down
well.
to.
Do you think it's
So
been
religion,
hijacked,
yeah.
James? I think
So
there's good
I
parts
think
of it, isn't there?
religion's, yeah, maybe religion's been a little bit of an easy scapegoat in certain respects, not in all respects. But again, it's this thing that what I want to talk about a little bit later is this kind of the categories that we put on things to make sense of the world. So like religion, types of religion that we have, and things that are done in the name of religion. And it's quite easy to kind of come behind and say, well, it's the Christians. You look at the the wars that have been perpetrated, the murders in the name of Christianity, for example. And then we immediately associate Muslim cultures and religion with acts of terrorism. And it's a throwaway thing to then just categorize and say, well, that religion is responsible for that. That was responsible for that in the name of. And it's a misguided, we're not, the agency went. When we look at something and don't question it, that's when problems occur. If you blindly follow something, whatever doctrine that is, and you don't question the legitimacy of it, the common sense element of it, that's the thing that really kind of gets me.
100%.
Is that why you would follow a doctrine? And again, I understand it, if that has been your narrative from birth, you were brought up in that society, brought up in that religion, that it's the foundation for everything. You make sense of the world again through this entity. And, we talked about yesterday around food and how we defend our food choices. This is on an even greater level. This is a systemic thing. This isn't just about what you put in your mouth every day. This is about how you interact with your neighbors, how your belief system. If it's questioned, you'll defend it because it's something that you've grown up with and wholeheartedly believe in. So, if there's an entity, whatever that looks like, and I'm going to take religion out of the equation, but if there's an entity, whatever it looks like, you don't question the validity of it, the humanity of it, then it's tricky. We're in problems.
Very, very tricky. Yeah. And then it gets into the realms of what it is a faith. You're having faith in something in the unknown. So these, they're talking about texts that are thousands and thousands of years old. It's a blind faith. Yeah. Obviously, we have no idea what we're doing on this planet. It's super strange. It's complex. And what I definitely know deep inside is that nobody knows. Whatever religion you are, I 100% believe that nobody knows deep down. Because if you was born in a different country, you wouldn't even have known what your religion is if somebody didn't tell you about it.
And the danger is that you then categorize everybody who's religious as being, a zealot or, that don't have any capacity for, and this is where it gets really, really tricky. The fact that, we can go, well, okay, I'm going to pigeonhole that into that and say that all people that are religious have no self-awareness, that they're just blindly following that faith. They don't question anything, which clearly isn't true. It just isn't true. But it can be quite convenient just to say, well, that is that, and then move on. Let's not scratch beneath the surface or ask any questions or be curious about it. Let's just categorize it as that and move on, because life is too fucking busy.
Yeah, I think Daniel makes a good point, though. I think it's a good discussion to have because the religion does it does start with a fixed point. So it's like an immovable belief, which I personally think, I love parts of religion, the community, moral guidelines. There's loads of
100%.
cohesion. There's, you know, that
100%.
it really enforces a group belief to be potentially better humans, more giving, more loving, love
I
thy
totally
neighbor type
agree.
of thing. And I think all religions have that at their core, isn't it? That some type of love, forgiveness, non-judgment. It's meant to be like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes the nuances of the fixed
It gets
beliefs
lost in
really,
translation.
yeah,
You know,
it
again,
gets,
it's like, let's read between the lines a little bit. The way I look at it is it's kind of a blueprint for how to live your life. If you follow it, but take elements of it. You know, not all of it
100%.
is
I think so,
appropriate.
yeah.
I think if you can cherry pick the bits that are, you know, relevant to you, that you can say, actually, that is a good thing, that gives me some structure. But then it's not, you know, well, I'm anti-gay, you know, I'm anti this, I'm anti that.
Yeah, it
And
goes
because it's
too
not written
far, doesn't
down
it?
in black and white, that means it can't be right, and therefore
Yeah.
I'm going to persecute you for it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But there is so much good that's done through religious organizations. There's so much giving and love and generosity, that because it's not incendiary, it's not particularly clickbaity, dare I say it, that it doesn't get the publicity that it should. It's when things go bad, when religions go bad, when societies go bad, then there's a groundswell of attention. And that's all we tend to see.
Yep. And it can be, I know, in terms of things like slavery or people that are impoverished, having some faith external to your own, you know, reality of suffering is, you know, a lifesaver, isn't it, for some people, James? So, because if you believe this is your life and that's it, and you don't believe in something else, or you don't have any faith, then that can really hamper you in those situations for those people. But Daniel says again here, I wish that the world population could default to being kind, understanding, tolerant, and empathetic, and not default to hate and belief above all else. I agree, Daniel. I think that's
beautifully
a
put, Dan.
good point.
Beautifully
and
put.
Ben's wrote a book here. Great points, both. I agree. Demilitarization would be a reflection of an elevated collective consciousness. The issue is it needs the collective to be at that consciousness. There needs to be a tipping point, because you can't get to this point demilitarized as long as there is one psycho with one nuclear weapon. For me, this utopian vision, demilitarization, is the current trajectory, even if it isn't the current reality. But to get to that point, humanity may have to go through a lot. I think so. I look at trajectories, really. So I definitely think that is where we're going. I just don't think we're anywhere near that. But I just think we are right at the very beginning. I see humanity as just being born at the moment. We've got so much to learn. We're just at the beginning of a tech revolution. We're learning, we're growing, and it's pretty early days, isn't it, James? We've got one more here. I do believe in God. I've seen the other side. Sean, whatever God is for you, Sean, I'm with you in a way. Maybe God is some type of universal energy for me, but I've had some like freaky moments, which sounds like conspiracy theory-ish, but I've said prayers before or spoken to the ether, and things have happened like following day that were just, you know, coincidences statistically can happen. 100%. I'm with that. If there's enough of a bigger population, coincidence could happen. But I've had it too many times to think that there isn't something else out there listening or reacting to you. So you might call that God. I just don't know what it is, James, to be honest.
I think how much of our brain do we utilize? Not even 10%. So how can we begin to fathom what is possible in this universe? You know,
100%.
I believe in a higher power, a greater entity, an energy Doesn't look like anything specifically. I don't put a name to it, and I don't identify with any one particular religion. It's just my own belief system.
Yeah, Chance says I'm dancing to this.
Dancing
so
to this.
I'm guessing she
Bless.
likes what we're saying on that one, Sean. But I'm with you. There's something out there. I don't know what it is, but yeah, we'll call it God.
Yeah,
we'll call it God.
let's find it. Let's
Keep
find it.
it easy.
We're all
Okay,
on a
let's
journey,
move on.
right?
Jesus, you talk too much, James. You talk too much. Here we go. We're moving on. Trump and Andrew Tate. So Trump is trying to help Andrew Tate get off of these charges for sex trafficking. I think the charges now. So let's just break this down quickly. Andrew Tate, he's become a phenomenon, isn't he? This guy. He's like what would we call it? He's like the social media bro of alpha masculinity type, caricature type consumerism thing.
Yeah, I guess he set himself up as the antithesis to modern feminism. And unfortunately, he's done it. And again, you've got to take an overview of all this. But just to go on what you said right at the beginning was, Trump is stepping in. It's one of his special aides, I believe, that's gone to where's he being held captive at the moment?
I think he's in Romania, isn't he?
Romania, that was it. Yeah. So I think he's gone to plead his case to the Romanian government, is what's happened. So, but obviously there's an intervention. Now, if there was any other American citizen that was being held under, let's say, for the sake of argument, false pretenses or false charges, would the American government step in and send one of his aides? We don't know. I don't know what the seniority of this guy is that's been sent, but nonetheless, somebody's been sent to plead his case or to have a conversation. But again, we've got to read between the lines in terms of how this is being reported, that Trump has personally intervened. One of his aides has gone. That's the first thing, I think, to clarify. But anyway, going back to Andrew Tate, I think he is a caricature of what men of a certain age think they need to counter the modern feminist movement. I think he set himself up as the voice in the heads of men that aren't. This is my perception of him. This is not my words, but are not brave enough to speak up for themselves. So he's taken it almost on himself to be that voice of the silent minority or majority, depending on your perspective. That's my view on it. Now, I've got a son who's 23, and we've had those conversations about him. And, you can see how young guys can relate to what he's saying. Yeah. And there's a backlash to how they're feeling. And, they're just unsure of how to feel within themselves. They don't know whether to be more masculine, less masculine, more in touch with their emotions, less in touch with their emotions. Are they authentic? Are they less authentic? Are they holding their power? Are they becoming the breadwinners? Are they not the breadwinners? Are they? All of these conflicting ideas have now been kind of anthropomorphized into an individual. All this unrest, and you see it through history that you've got populations that don't know which way to turn next, and they're looking for something to hang their hat on, some kind of anchor, some social cue as to how to live their lives. And religion is a large element of that. But when it takes the form of an individual that looks a little bit like them, speaking a little bit like them, and again, Trump is an example of that, then you can see how the traction starts to build, and that relatability comes into play.
Yeah, I agree. And Sean says the same. She says, I see it as very confusing for young men right now. And I agree. And when it comes to Andrew Tate, I think, he's come from, I know I used to live in there where he grew up in Luton. So he's come from a background, potentially not a lot of money. And then he's sort of caught the zeitgeist, the moment. He picked up the moment, didn't he, where it was the Big Brother era and social media and consumerism all in one, all sort of, And then he filled that void where maybe, you know, a lot of guys were being told that you're privileged, you're this, you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. A lot of guys are feeling maybe disenfranchised. And then he's became the voice of a new way, because in terms of this capitalist game, he looks like he's the pinnacle, isn't he? He's buying Bugattis. He looks fantastic. He's a great looking guy. He's in brilliant shape. He's teaching people to do exercise, but the sexual abuse.
This is clearly not a commentary on me, but I was in a petrol station, must have been middle part of last year. I was just getting some petrol, I was going to pay, and some two lads in a car drove past and went, "Tate!" shouted at me.
That's what I was going to say. You've modeled yourself on him.
I mean, like, maybe I should kind of wig up.
What colour's your Bugatti, James?
It's racing green.
It's racing green Bugatti. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
But that's completely throwaway comment, and obviously for comedy value. But like,
Tate is funny. He is in a dark sense of humor funny, and he plays the game of attention. What is not good, and the underlying thing, it's the same as Trump, is that there is smoke around him being, very toxic around women. Even the things that he did with the webcam business and convincing these guys that they were talking and getting them to pass over their life savings. This stuff that's not good. That's not good, is it? Yeah, you can imagine when you get these guys that get power, and there's people that are accusing. Look, he's not guilty. You've got to go through a process of a court of law and be proven, that type of stuff. Who knows where that's going to go? So we're not going to pass judgment on whatever's happened there. But the accusations there, James, are just not. They're dangerous.
So you're taking the stance that there's no smoke without fire. That he's not just, being cancelled in the most publicly humiliating, complete way. That any of that could. I don't know. Again,
I'm just taking the facts, James, of
exactly
webcam business, and he expressively says how he tried to convince women to love him and sleep with him for power and control, and coercing these women and being very manipulative, and then manipulating the guys. I know there's a lot of desperate guys out there who are paying for sex, paying to be loved, basically. A lot of desperate guys. And they're handing over wads and wads of cash, and he's manipulating them. It's basically like, it's criminal. It's dark criminal activity. And that is not I can say on one hand, look, Tate, he can be funny sometimes, he's good looking and all of this type of stuff, but that does not take away or condone any of his behaviors in terms of the way he's carrying on. And that's not a way to influence young boys. That's not masculinity at all.
No. And then you make a character assessment of people that do rise to the top in these situations.
Yeah.
And, a thorough psychological assessment would need to be done to get a sense of his character, trauma-based. 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, there's going to be some level of trauma there. Whether you sort of say he's got narcissistic tendencies in the true sense of the word narcissistic, not just, that he loves himself, that, it seems to get misconstrued. But, is a closet narcissist, or an overt or a covert narcissist, for example? So there's going to be some, personality traits there that enable people to relish in the controversy of where he's got himself to. And it's that tip over then of thinking maybe that you're untouchable, that you can do these things that you were talking about. If it's proved to be true that he was trafficking, that there's, sex offences there. And things to be shown. It's like there's no smoke without fire, that all these things are going to come out in the fullness of time. And, whichever way you look at it, I don't see it as a healthy example to young men. It's that simple.
I would say that there's elements of discipline and looking after yourself and being focused. I get that, a lot of guys are lost, but what is the cost? You're right. What is the cost of that information? Because you could say about, you could say about any dark person in history that they've got positive elements. You could say Hitler was a brilliant leader, couldn't you? On one sense, but what he did was atrocious. Yeah. So for every person, there's Trump is a brilliant communicator. Again, there's a lot of question marks over his character. So I think it ties in nicely to the feminism talk, James, because you're the expert in feminism. So I'll let you dig yourself a grave and
I'll just dig myself out of that one. But what I said earlier, I'm just wearing, this is my personal view of labeling anything. And we label things to make sense of the world. Like I've said before, with, religion, with the countries we live in, our communities. That's how we make sense of the world. But I think it's really tricky and challenging to label anything that will then enable a group to demonize that particular label. So it's like all women are feminists, all men are misogynists, and are bound by the patriarchy, and they're under that influence, and that's it, end of argument. And that's where I think we've got this polarization that, this entity exists. It's there for a reason. We look over millennia of the relationship between men and women, and it kind of goes cyclically. It's never this linear thing that, women have been in this particular role. Depends on the circumstance, depends on the individual. But we kind of throw this blanket assumption and label on certain things. And then it's very convenient just to lump everybody into that category. Yeah. And for me personally, this is just my view, is that that's where the problems occur if we don't then start to kind of break it down into maybe subsets, or, to look at things as a whole and say, look, clearly not all women identify themselves in a particular way. Clearly there are women that, are very much in favor of, equal opportunities for men and for women, and that we're not blaming men for everything, and not all men are blaming women for everything. These two should happily, again, talking about utopia, coexist, that we're all pulling together in the same way, that we're looking at each other's foibles, at each other's failings, at each other's, issues that we have, and saying, look, I see you. I see that going on. I understand where that comes from with you, and I'm taking the time to find that out. I'm asking questions. I'm being observant. I'm being curious. I'm not reacting to what you say. I'm just asking, like, why is that your perspective? Why is that your view? I'm just interested to find out why that's your view, and have a conversation around it. Now that sounds, I don't know how it sounds. That's just how my mind works, is that if we can have a conversation, that's a start point. If we can open up dialogue without immediately going, shut down, what that was absolutely that way. I'm not thinking anything more of it. That's really upset me. I'm not going to have the conversation with you. We're done.
Yep. I think you're right there, James. I think
clearly to sort of, sorry, man, I'm on a rant, but clearly it comes down to the catalyst for that moment in time. What was the rhetoric? What was the stuff that cannot be misconstrued? I'm not going to say there aren't sort of, nuances and things like that, but there's certain things that are just like, I'm sorry, that is not acceptable.
Yep.
So who defines then what's acceptable, what's not acceptable? Because for some person, that absolutely categorically is not acceptable. For somebody else, they might go, well, hold on a minute, let's just scratch beneath the surface of that. So it's a nigh on impossible situation that we find ourselves in, to be able to say, look, nobody's going to get shut down, nobody's going to get triggered, but can we just be a little bit curious as to the reasons why? Scratch beneath the surface, ask the questions, get to know the individual if that's possible. And doing things like this now on video, it's like, you can see my eyes, you can see my gestures, you can see how I'm, responding to questions and things like that. Not everybody has that ability or facility to be able to do that, but how can we achieve that without just making this snap judgment about the individual? Well, this is what they like. Clearly that, otherwise they wouldn't have said it. We're done.
Yeah, it's a good place to start the labeling, actually. I probably wouldn't have started there, but I think it's the definitions of words are important. You say feminism is a blanket statement. Obviously, it says here feminism is a movement advocating for women's rights based on equality with men. But even that statement, when we come to equality, we're both fathers to daughters and we've got wives, but is it the equality of opportunity or equality of outcome? So they can be very different. Men and women are different in many ways, and that's okay. So the equality thing can start to get a little bit confusing, can't it? And a little bit divisive in that way. So I would say, in terms of feminism, of what it is in terms of the past, James, so it says it's evolved in waves. So first wave, 19th, 20th century, focused on voting rights and legal equality. Second wave, 1960s to 1980s, addressed workplace rights, reproductive rights, and domestic violence. Third wave, 1990s to 2000, challenged gender norms and intersectionality. And then fourth wave, focus on digital activism, Me Too movement, structural inequalities. So there is different types, isn't there, at different times? It's probably like left and right wing ideologies where, what was center left in the 70s may seem more center right now, type of thing. I'm not saying that's exactly right, but there are shifts, aren't there, in norms. And when it comes to using this language, you can say feminism to one person, it could mean completely something different to other people. Do you know what I mean? So in terms of women, oppression, let's say, where this feminism is coming from, if they haven't got rights. So it says New Zealand was the first country to grant women the right to vote in 1893. The UK, some women gained the right to vote in 1918, full equality in 1928. So we're not even 100 years into women being able to vote in the UK. In the US, women gained the right to vote in 1920. In France, it was 1944. So,
incredible.
In Switzerland, incredible. Women were denied voting rights until 1971. Saudi Arabia, women were granted voting rights in 2015.
Yeah.
Slightly behind on the old Saudi Arabia. We've got the pay gap differences. That's nuanced. So in the UK, women earned 15.4% less than men on average. And it says, until 1975, James, a British woman needed her husband's permission to open a bank account. So there is obviously, women have got a strong point here, haven't they? And there's some major inequalities in terms of your rights to maneuver in society. So I'm totally with that, improving that situation, because that's not good, is it, James?
No. I mean, even down to, medical practices being very male dominated and being based on the male anatomy as opposed to the female anatomy. So it's even having agency of your own body for a long time that, all the medicines, even clothing. I mean, I don't know how recently it was that trainers, for example, were only based on a man's foot, and they would just colored differently for women. They didn't actually take into account the different anatomy of a woman's foot as opposed to a man's. And this is a fairly recent thing that's come into existence. So it just shows how we can have an understanding as to why. We have an awareness as to why. We can completely understand. And either we are then forever apologizing for history and what's gone before, and then it becomes a place of defensiveness and like, oh gosh, how many times have we got to apologize for the oppression of women and things like that? This is the sentiment that is pervasive underneath that, to then going, how do we get better? You know, how do we have these dialogues where actually we're bringing up our boys to be respectful, to be comfortable in the world, that they don't feel like they have to be a certain way around women, that we're not, as fathers, giving them this version of masculinity that is counter to what women want, need, deserve.
It's a fine balance, isn't it, James?
It's a really fine balance, because again, you've got the situation where men are supposed to be the providers, are supposed to be the strong ones, are supposed to be resilient, are supposed to be this, all of this are supposed to be. But then I talked to my wife, for example, and she said, you know, I feel closest to you when you're vulnerable. I feel closest to you when you show me your emotions, whether that's anger, whether that's tears. The worst thing, and that I feel so distant from you, is when you don't show any emotion at all, when you shut down. And that's, you know, a lesson to learn, that I can have these emotions. I'm not having those emotions shut down on me. Entirely the opposite. It's like, let's have that conversation. I want to see some emotion in you, because that makes me know that you're here and present. It's when I'm like, no, everything's fine. No, I'm good. And there's nothing to hold on to. There's no relationship.
Yeah. But again, you know, subconsciously, if you was the opposite and you was like crying every 5 minutes and being emotional, that would be too far on the opposite
that's
side.
That's completely the other way, mate, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know,
there's a balance between all of these
this
things.
Is the barometer, and therein lies the problem. It's like, you know, are you a hard bastard, or are you a complete wuss?
Yeah,
it's like.
Come on, emotional intelligence is to sort of find the middle ground. But it says here marital rape was legal in the UK until 1991.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'll have to double check that, because that is from ChatGPT, but that doesn't sound good, does it?
Mate, I can't believe that.
Do you think so? We're gonna have to double check that, because that is that's not good. But let's go on the flip side, James, with this on the men's side. So it goes, have all men always been allowed to vote? No. In terms of the UK, only land-owning men could vote until 1918. So we talk about the women's vote. Well, most men couldn't vote either. It's only land-owning gentry that could vote up until that point, and that's then it
that's
comes
where the patriarchy, I think, comes from, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's that landed gentry passing down from father to son, the ability to control everything.
But you're talking about you're talking about 0.1% of men here, James. So you've got 99.9% who feel completely disenfranchised, but are being blamed because the very top are men.
Yeah,
it's pretty much the same as war, isn't it?
It's representative of men, isn't it? That's the thing. Yeah. It's a small percentage that represents all men, and that's where
that nuance has to come in. That understanding that, you know, most men don't put in these laws of, you know, even the laws that go through Parliament. It's not your average man that's normally dividing sorting these things out. So that needs to be like talked about. It says in the USA, only white land-only men could vote in the 18th and 19th century. Black men were granted voting rights in 1870, 15th Amendment, but voter suppression, Jim Crow laws kept many voting until 1965. Yeah, kept many from voting until 1965. So that's when the black people got their vote. So again, they're going to feel very disenfranchised, aren't they? Certain minorities, but we're talking about a very small amount of powerful people, which are white males, but not all white males fit that character. That caricature. It's 99% of white males. They've got no power or influence, and that's what needs to be understood, isn't it, in this thing?
Yeah.
So in terms of what is the patriarchy, James, so you had it on there, but I've got it on here. Patriarchy is a social system where men hold power in political, economic, and social structures, while women are often subordinate. It's a patriarchal system. So,
and
like we said,
the power being handed down from father to son, that sort of the firstborn son inherits the estate, inherits, and even if there's the firstborn is a girl, that the son still inherits. That was the basis of the patriarchy.
And then we put the billionaires list on there the other day, didn't we? It's mostly men, to be honest. Only 10% of world leaders are women. Women hold only 29% of global parliamentary seats. 10% of the Forbes 500 CEOs are women, so 90% of men. So unpaid labor, women do 75% of the world's unpaid work.
Yeah.
There's a systemic problem here, James, isn't there? I'm totally behind.
Which, again, it's a gross generalization, and only through conversations again with my wife and my daughter of the way in which women are brought up, girls are brought up, and there's still that gender difference between the way boys are treated and the way girls are treated. And certainly my wife, for example, grew up without a voice. She didn't feel like she could be effectual. She was told to be not be emotional. But this is her lived experience. I'm not saying this is all girls by any means. This is just her experience, and not to be emotional, not to be dramatic, and then didn't have a voice. So when you're talking about equality, I think it's about having a voice. That everybody is equal in their voice and their opinion, and they should all be heard.
Yeah,
that's equality to me.
But on a micro level, 100%. On a macro level, we've got to just be honest and say it's 0.1% of people control the masses. It's 0.1% of people who send people to war. It's 1% of people that own most of the assets in the UK. It's mostly 1% of people that will own most of, all financial assets, land. So, we might be thinking we've got a voice on a micro level, but in reality, however this is done or however this system is working on a macro level, then there's mass inequality and the wealth inequality is rising all the time. So,
I mean, what won't work is attacking each other. Because, if a bloke feels attacked, he's going to fight back. And fighting back is then going to antagonize the other side. So women will then push back. Guys then push back. Women push back. And we just get a war of attrition. So how is a dialogue created that actually, blokes aren't then just reacting to this, toxic feminism, women aren't reacting to toxic masculinity. And by giving them those terms, even saying toxic one side, toxic the other, makes it feel like this poison, this battle. Just the words that we use around this, the vernacular in respect of what this is. If we just think about that for a second, that just gives you an idea about what is going on right here. That actually, if we could use something that was a little bit softer or engaging, then maybe we could have a communication around it, rather than just being, that's it.
I agree. Sean, 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted in the UK. Yeah, that was one of the stats that we had coming up on here. Yeah, you're right. Sexual assault is a massive,
absolutely, 100%
problem. Huge problem. And it's interesting because I always think to myself, in a logical way, can women ever really have equality? Because men are physically stronger, and everything in society, when it comes down to it, is based on an undercurrent of violence. Everything. So if you go to war, if you don't pay your mortgage, eventually somebody's going to come out and physically move you.
I don't subscribe, mate. I don't subscribe. I don't believe that everything comes down to physicality.
In the end.
No, I don't see it, mate. You've got to make the case for, for the intellectual pursuit of negotiation, of being able to think smart and create a situation where, violence in the physical act is not required.
But in reality, it seems to be pinned by violence.
In your reality.
Well, everybody's like this is what war is, isn't it? In every single thing.
Do you feel under threat on a daily basis of violence?
No.
No.
Not at all.
I don't.
But I have been attacked by other men, like punched to the floor on a couple of occasions. So you could say,
it happens. It does happen.
Is that abuse? It's not abuse. It was an attack. So I have been punched before.
So from a woman's perspective, I would argue that they are feeling vulnerable on a very regular basis.
Yeah, they are more vulnerable because in general they're not as strong physically as men. That it's just a fact, isn't it? In general terms, they are not as physically strong, so there is a vulnerability there, which is completely understandable.
But it goes deeper. It goes deeper than that in terms of the way. And again, can't categorize all men together because certainly I don't act that way, and I'm pretty sure you don't act that way. Of acting inappropriately around women.
Yeah.
Not all men do that, but a lot do.
Again, when we say a lot, we have to be careful. We have to look. Even statistics are blurred, and in the majority of cases, women will walk past 10,000 men every single day, and they won't hear a peep from them. If you were struggling with your car, or something was happening and you was in danger, I guarantee there would be men around somewhere that would come and help. There is men around there that are predatory.
There are a lot of good men.
There's a lot of good. But sometimes, like everything, there's the few that poison the water. Whether it's racism in a football crowd or it's the 1% that control people to send people to war. There's people that poison the waters here, isn't there, James, on that? But in terms of quickly, Jordan Peterson critique of feminism and patriarchy, because he's a famous psychologist, is quite influential. So his key arguments were there's a competence difference, competence over versus oppression. Men hold more leadership positions due to biological differences. So in terms of certain positions, we are physically different. Hormonally, on average, we probably, are different. If you look at any sport, you would say, you wouldn't put really men against women in in any sports really. There would be very, very few sports where they could actually compete at that level. So, Peterson's got probably something there in terms of there are differences, so the outcomes are going to be different, especially in interest as well.
I would love to see a scenario where all positions of power were filled by women, and then we'd look to see what the world looked like. In terms of war, in terms of oppression, in terms of, the situation we're in now, we'll never know. But I just want to put that out there as a scenario that we could think about what the world would look like if all positions of power were filled by women and not men. I would argue the world would look very, very different.
I wouldn't necessarily it was better, James, to be honest. I personally,
I reckon there'd be less conflict.
I would argue about that 100%. I would argue in terms of if there would be or not. It would be it's an interesting psychological experiment.
It's an impossible scenario to put up, but it's one worth thinking about.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the other ones with Jordan Peterson, gender pay gap is complex. Differences in pay result from personal choices in terms of, there are differences. People have career breaks, women give birth, that type of stuff. Giving birth just doesn't fit a capitalist narrative, does it, James? Capitalism doesn't care about that. Doesn't care.
Well, when you think employers are going to think twice, possibly, that's the unfortunate reality, is that some employers think twice about employing a woman of a certain age because they may get pregnant, and the impact it will have on their business it's the reality.
That's what I was saying in the post. I was saying, look, the capitalist system is against the parenthood side. Women are giving birth. They go through this period and they want to have, contact with their child in the early days. But the systemic oppression is forcing people back into work, which is a difficult one, isn't it?
So it's not about women's choice about whether to work or whether to not work, to have children, not to have children. It's the way the system's set up. And I think that got lost in the narrative.
Because, and it says on here, potentially certain things about feminism ignores male suffering sometimes. So men are higher suicide rates, 95% of men are in prison, more workplace accidents with men, family court bias as well on there. So, there's a lot of things, like we said before, James, we sort of had this, we played these sort of thought experiments, and we said, if you was on the Titanic and they said men and children first, it just hasn't got the same ring to it, does it?
No. Suicide rates, I'd want to kind of delve into whether you could ever find out the true reasons why men are committing suicide. The tricky aspect comes in if you're relating that to their interaction with women or feminist movement that seemingly has caused more men to commit suicide.
76%, James. 76%.
That's a disastrous.
Are men worldwide suicide.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, but I would argue that is the way in which we're brought up in terms of our role, gender roles, and if there's an increase in suicide, I would push back against whether any of that has got anything to do with the emancipation of women and their relationships with us. I would say it was more about, childhood trauma, the way in which we're raised as boys, and the societal and self-imposed expectations that we have on ourselves of being worthy or not worthy.
I'm with you, James, on that one. And it says men receive 63% longer prison sentences than women for the same crimes. US Sentencing Commission 2023. So there is obviously, men haven't got the, a lot of men, the privilege thing comes along. I get it. There's advantages, and disadvantages, aren't there? There's obviously a lot of men that feel disenfranchised by a system. There's a lot of women that feel under threat. And as we've gone through those statistics today, you can obviously see why hugely. But we need to come together to find some middle ground, don't we? To be honest, James,
we can't continue. We can't continue the way we're going. I mean,
because really, James, we want to we do want to improve things. You know, I think men should have a voice in feminism. I think that's very positive. I think women should have a voice in whatever the equivalent is for men. You know what I mean? I think
all about the voice. It's all about the voice.
Because you're not isolated in your gender, and every situation's different. I might be a white male from the UK in poverty. It's going to be different from a African king, isn't it? In a different country, different economic standing, completely different reality, different culture. We're both men seeing the world in completely different ways. And that's the same with women. Just because you're one gender, it doesn't mean you know everything about women, or your subjective experience that can be overlaid on every single other person because, you know, you've got a hormonal makeup that's similar and you both got a vagina. It's not going to be the same experience. Similarities, you might be able to understand their position, but like, you know, yourself and I, different life experiences, both white males, middle-aged, but you don't see the same things I do. We agree on some things, we disagree on other things. So I can't say all men do this, all men do that, because me and you are different.
Yeah, exactly.
Drastically.
Exactly. And that's the awareness piece, mate.
Yeah, but I think we'll leave it there, James, because we could go on and on with this one. Let me just quickly, if there's a couple of questions here. I think Daniel's having a chat with Sean on here at the moment. Shall we bring these up quickly, James?
Go for it.
Daniel, I'm all for equality, but things shouldn't become skewed just to fit the individual story. You can say, but how many men as a percentage are fighting on front lines? How many men are building the houses, streets, infrastructure compared to women? Yeah, it's a good point. We can't just throw everybody under the bus. There's whatever you say about patriarchy, it's given a very negative connotation, James, in that. And I get it with the oppression, but like everything we've spoken about today, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, can we? There's a lot of men building infrastructure. Their main reason for living is to protect their daughters and their wives and to serve them, for a lot of men. So we can't just, say this is a whole lot of oppression and you don't give the other story. So I'm definitely,
it's all two sides.
I'm definitely behind that. We've done that one, and then Sean's come back with Daniel Hampton. This is why it has all got mixed up. I am daily thankful for men that play these roles and for the few women who do, and I love being in a nurturing role, supporting a strong man. Yeah. What does equality mean to you, Daniel? Yeah, that's great, because I think we've each got our strengths, haven't we, James? And we can complement each other. Yeah. And it's not always the same. Sometimes a woman goes to work and it fits your narrative for your life. Maybe she's got skills in the capitalist game that make more money, and it's better for your family at that specific time. Sometimes the roles are reversed.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty good from them.
I think that's a very nice way to wrap that up, my man.
Yeah. We'll get back to you in the comments section, because we could go on all day with this. But thanks, guys, for watching. And again,
and it's just our opinion.
It's just our opinion.
Just our opinion.
Yeah, let's try to have like I've said it with other guys that have like called me names and things like that online, or thrown out things like misogynist or donut or you can't read, that type of thing. And I think, I'm happy to have healthy discourse, healthy conversation where you just try to understand somebody else's opinion, give an alternative perspective. Maybe you can alter your beliefs, but not to come out all guns blazing on the attack. So anytime you read something,
breathe.
Think about it. If it's giving you a visceral reaction, have a think about it first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay then, James.
Agreed.
Right, we'll see you guys next. Oh, we'll see you tomorrow. Bloody hell,
Well,
James.
see you tomorrow. We're doing this on a daily basis, buddy.
We will see you tomorrow, guys. So have a good one. Take care.
Much love.
Bye.